When Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice was released, I remember the developers had told everyone exactly what the game was all about. The framing wasn't subtle on this. In interviews and in promotional material, Ninja Theory emphasized that the game's central purpose was to portray psychosis and mental illness, all with accuracy and sensitivity. Senua's experiences of psychosis are rooted in both neuroscience and in real lived experience. Now, the point of me talking about this is that the whole meaning of the game arrived pre-attached. The audience was not invited to discern what Senua's visions might signify within the world of the story. No, instead we were all told in advance how to understand them. And all this leads me to the topic of this video. The contemporary imagination suffers from a very peculiar malnutrition. We are surrounded by so many stories nowadays, yet we're starved of any meaning. And the problem here is not that media lacks themes, it's that when they arrive, they've already been digested. You see, the modern storyteller is very anxious, terrified of being misunderstood, so they rush to supply their audience with an interpretive key before the door has even been encountered by the audience. And what this results in is not a real narrative, but more like an instruction book. And that's why so much of modern media is about consumption and not about discovery. It's a condition I call pre-interpreted storytelling. And the phenomenon is very easy to observe. Consider the way certain games and films just announce themselves. In addition to crafting a world, the people who make those worlds find it necessary to bolt a moral lesson onto its framework, just in case you missed the point. The medium is all about trauma, or about mental illness, or about overcoming your inner demons, and so on and so forth. The audience is told in advance what a story means, and the narrative becomes a vessel for a message already fixed, already clarified, already insulated from any risk of misinterpretation. But what this means is the work is no longer permitted to speak on its own voice. It must instead echo a familiar therapeutic vocabulary. Now, when a story is pre-interpreted, the audience is relieved of the burden of discernment. They need not attend to the textures of the world, or the contradictions of the characters, or any moments of silence that might speak louder than exposition would. No, instead, the audience need only repeat what they have been told. And the result is a strange parody of analysis, online discussions that merely summarize the plot, and then they congratulate themselves for all their insight. But summary is not analysis. It's the passive recital of a meaning that has already been supplied to them. Now, in a healthier narrative ecology, meaning emerges from the encounter between the reader and the text. A good story withholds just as much as it reveals, and it invites the audience to partake in its world vicariously. Interpretation should be its own form of participation, a way of entering into communion with the work, which necessarily means more than one interpretation exists. And that's why leftists or progressive types don't like telling stories this way. They want you to accept and obey their values without supplying you with modes of interpretation. Because a mode of interpretation would imply that although they are telling the story, they don't know everything. They might be wrong. But pre-interpretive storytelling treats ambiguity as a liability, and too many authors assume that their works must be protected from any misreadings. But that forsakes treating one's audience as participants in a shared search for truth. It's one of the reasons I despise much of leftist storytelling, and why I don't believe in the myth that leftists are somehow more creative than conservatives. Progressives never let you figure out what their stories are about. Instead, their stories always feel like the author knows all of the answers about the world, and that you just need to sit down and listen to them teach you about how the world really works. And this anxiety is also woven into the habits of the audience as well. Many people have been trained to expect stories that declare their purpose and reassure us that we're on the right track, and that all spares us of the discomfort of uncertainty. So we lose the capacity to dwell in mystery, to discern meaning through patient attention, and to allow a story to exceed our expectations. This impoverishes the audience. A narrative that explains itself cannot truly surprise us. So a character who names his psychological conditions cannot reveal anything deeper than his diagnosis. Just like a character who names his sexual identity doesn't reveal anything deeper than where he likes to stick his junk. A world that arrives with its themes pre-labeled cannot disclose something unexpected. More stories ought to be opaque. Opacity is the space in which interpretation becomes possible, and that means the refusal to reduce characters to a case study, or a plot to a moral lesson. We ought to look at stories less as products and more as a relationship between ourselves and the text. In that sense, true analysis becomes less an academic exercise and more a form of communion. Pre-interpreted storytelling denies us that communion and offers us meaning without a mystery attached to it. Stories need not explain themselves in order to be meaningful. More authors ought to trust their audience is capable of discernment.